All right, let's talk about honey. We've had a lot of questions about liquid honey versus crystallized honey and creamed honey. Want to get into it. So maybe, as you may or may not know, when honey first comes out of the hive, it is in a liquid form. And oftentimes, if a beekeeper does a huge harvest, throughout those warm spring, summer, and even into kind of early autumn months, when they extract it from the honeycomb, the hive, it's in a liquid form. But as it sits, honey just naturally begins to crystallize. So honey never goes off. It's the only food that perfectly preserves itself forever. So if you ever have a honey that naturally crystallizes, it's still perfectly good. It's just changing shape, changing form. Honey is primarily glucose and fructose in its composition of sugars, and it's that glucose that tends to crystallize. And it crystallizes in larger chunks. So the description of it being very kind of crystally, not crunchy, but has this crystally kind of a texture, because that's how the sugars just naturally crystallize over time. Now, there is a form of honey that maybe you've had before called a creamed honey. And this was actually invented, it was patented actually back in early 1900s, where somebody figured out how they could affect the crystalline structure of the honey. Now, not in a bad way to say it was patented, that kind of thing. It's actually a fairly natural process, and if you ever wanted to cream your own honey, you need to actually start with what they call seed crystals from a creamed honey. And you do a 1-to-10 ratio where you take 10% of an already creamed honey and then put it into a liquid honey. And then basically what that does is it sort of, instructs the rest of the honey to crystallize into a much smaller, more smooth crystalline structure that was characteristic of creamed honey. So that's really the big difference, is that the crystals in a creamed honey, they're smaller crystals, they're smoother, and they're a different formation than how honey naturally crystallizes. So you're just influencing the crystalline structure of honey, and a lot of beekeepers will offer both. They'll offer a liquid honey that, again, will naturally over time crystallize, as well as do this process of adding a seed crystal honey to create a creamed honey. And now the creamed honeys are amazing. They have this nice kind of smooth texture. Even though it is crystallized, it still is spreadable. It's almost spoonable in that way. It won't pour like a liquid honey, but if you've ever tried a creamed honey, it's a great texture. And maybe it influences the flavor just slightly, but it's a great way to go. So regardless, liquid honey or that naturally crystallizes, don't worry, all good. That's what happens. If you want to re-liquefy your honey, if it's been sitting in the jar, or especially these cooler temperatures this time of year, it may cause the honey to crystallize faster than it would normally at warmer temperatures. And if you're like, hey, what happened to my honey? I want it liquid again. Then what you would do is you take your jar, and you don't want to directly heat it. You want to put it into a hot water bath, so like a double boiler. So you'd have some hot water below, and then this in a bowl of water, and that heat transfer gently carries through, warms the honey gently, because you don't want to heat honey. Honey does have a high heat tolerance. I would say 40, even 50 degrees centigrade, which is quite a bit of heat. It can withstand quite a bit of heat. But if we take it above that, what they say above hive temperature, 50 degrees or so, then we begin to denature the honey. We begin to lose a lot of its medicinal properties, including its enzymes. So this is why we want to seek out raw honey, unpasteurized honey, and a little bit of heat is okay, as long as we're monitoring how hot it gets. And if you like the creamed honey, then hey, you can either purchase as is, or you can make your own. You know the ratio, 1-to-10. Add that seed crystal in, and that will influence the rest of the honey to go into those smaller, smoother crystal formations. Honey, it's an amazing food.